friends. This is another episode of the program Empire of Lies, in which we discuss manipulation and disinformation in the Russian media, when war becomes an excuse for everything. Russian television is once again echoing the Kremlin's message. The country is in danger, the West is closing in, the fatherland is under threat. The broadcasts feature long monologues in which economic problems are transformed into the result of enemy intrigues, and the war itself is a sacred duty. Solovyov, one of the regime's main voices, constructs his narrative like the sermon of a besieged fortress. And the more dire the situation, the louder the call for the mobilization of all society. Russia is the victim, the West is the eternal aggressor. At the center of his speech is an old but effective justification. Russia is not attacking, it is defending itself. According to the TV presenter, weakness is unacceptable because it creates the temptation to resolve the issue with us by force. A world in which Russia could be a partner does not exist in this picture. There are only enemies, the entire Western bloc, and Moscow, which can only withstand the blow. This scheme is simple and dangerous. Any difficulties within the country are explained by external aggression. Inflation, fuel shortages, the economic crisis. All of this, Solovyov asserts, is the result of Western attacks, sanctions, and covert sabotage. Even rising gasoline prices are transformed into an act of war, a factor accelerating inflation on the enemy's orders. From economics to war ideology, the idea of a war economy is built on this foundation. If, as he says, 40% of the budget goes to defense, then everything else must be subordinated to the front. Solovyov seriously proposes channeling funds from sports clubs into an air defense system, so that the men can keep watch in the evenings, like during the Great Patriotic War. Thus, a new type of mobilization is taking shape, not administrative, but moral. Russians are being asked to give up their normal lives, sports, entertainment, even foreigners in football, not because it's necessary, but because war is a natural state. Here lies the fundamental substitution. War ceases to be a tragedy and becomes an excuse for any inefficiency, any arbitrary action, any economic failure. War as a business plan. Economics occupies a special place in this rhetoric. The TV presenter openly calls for the creation of new defense plants, long-term military contracts, and the diversification of oil refining, all under the slogan, "Getting on a war footing." Even the shortcomings of bureaucracy or corruption are portrayed not as the fault of the authorities, but as a lack of resolve. Perhaps we all need to come to our senses, Solovyov asks rhetorically. This phrase captures the essence of what's happening. Russia, he argues, must finally transform into a country where everything, from gasoline to sports, is subordinated to military logic. In such a system, there's no room left for civil discourse. The enemy is everywhere, both within and without. Against the backdrop of Western accusations of economic strangulation, an internal narrative emerges. Some in the country refuse to understand reality. In other words, doubts are unacceptable. Those who don't share the logic of everything for the front are declared either naive or dangerous. Thus, step by step, a totalitarian model is built. The world around us is the enemy, the economy is the front, and those who disagree are traitors. The monologue concludes with a climax. The world is reinstating universal military service. Europe is preparing for war with us. This is a centuries-old tradition, a phrase in which war with Europe is no longer a threat, but something inevitable, almost natural. Let me give you some figures. If you look at interest rates in Russia, they're 17%. Inflation is well over 10%. At least 40% of the Russian budget this year is spent on defense. So now is the time to increase the pressure on Russia even more. And to this end, we've proposed a new approach to sanctions. We're no longer applying sanctions in stages, but we're proposing much tougher measures in the energy, financial services, and trade sectors. This is the 19th sanctions package, which is currently under consideration. In fact, the 19th sanctions package doesn't play any role. What matters is the provision of long-range weapons and accurate data on strikes against our strategically important targets, such as the oil and gas industries and the defense industry. It's no coincidence that the West is now actively promoting the narrative of 1918, when Germany collapsed not because its armed forces lost, but because its economy was so exhausted that it couldn't continue the war. And they believe that this is a project that will work against us, not against them. What lies behind this? All of this isn't just television noise, it's an ideological restructuring of mass consciousness. While the West discusses arms supplies to Ukraine or sanctions against Moscow, Russian propaganda is restructuring society for a long-term existence in a state of conflict. Now the goal is not victory, but eternal mobilization, justifying any hardship. For Europe, this is a mirror, not a threat. It's no coincidence that Solovyov and his ilk so persistently mention Europe. It's needed as a backdrop, as the embodiment of a hostile civilization. But behind the grandiose words lies fear. Fear of one's own exhaustion, of the fact that the myth of a great Russia can't withstand the impact of reality. You've been on the Empire of Lies program. See you soon.